Today, on Grave Hunting with Auntie Jen, we are going to visit the graves of the Swope family. This includes William Chrisman Swope, who was the final victim of Dr. Bennett Clark Hyde. It was his death and the subsequent illnesses of the family that prompted Maggie Chrisman Swope to bring into question the practices and the motive of Dr. Hyde. According to records, they are buried in Mount Washington Cemetery in Independence, Missouri, in the Garden of Memories section. So join us today as we hunt down their final resting place to pay our respects and maybe learn a little bit more about them. Mount Washington Cemetery was established around 1902 when 400 acres of what used to be Mount Washington Park was purchased by Mount Washington Cemetery Association. Mount Washington Park was the home to Missouri's largest and most beautiful amusement park until it closed in 1900. Under the direction of Mr. George E. Kessler, landscape architect of the St. Louis World's Fair, they transformed the wooded hills, winding streams, and public playground into the beautiful, picturesque cemetery that you see today. Their goal was not to just make another cemetery, but one that patrons would enjoy visiting to see the beautiful rustic lands and architecture. And today, Mount Washington Cemetery is the final home to 43,000 men and women from all walks of life. Now let me tell you, I was not prepared for the size of this cemetery. We could have easily spent a full day just driving around this beautiful cemetery, looking at the surroundings, headstones, and buildings. The way they used the rolling hills to build the mausoleums into the ground was not only creative, but practical. Before you visit this cemetery to look for family members, you definitely need to contact the office. Otherwise, you will be looking for a needle in a very large haystack. I had reached out to the office through email, but never received a response, so I would suggest calling if possible. I have also heard reports that they charge for lookups, so you need to verify that first. They have a form online where you can fill out and request the grave location of your ancestor. I got lucky though. Someone had posted the location of the Swopes on their Find a Grave memorials. So, off to the Garden of Memories. Since we didn't have the exact location, we were going to have to walk this whole section to see if we could find where the Swopes were buried. I'm hoping that they have a big headstone that says Swope on it so we can find them. So I am currently in Mount Washington Cemetery. I am trying to locate the Swope family. And I couldn't get a hold of anybody before we traveled to find out exactly where they're located. But according to their Find a Grave memorials, they are in the Garden of Memories section, which is where I am, but let me show you here. It kind of starts right down here, and then it travels all the way back down there. My husband's way back over there in the distance, but it goes way down there. And it's hilly and unstable, and I'm having a heck of a time trying to find them. After much searching, my hubby finally located them, literally right next to the road. Oi. Anyway, I think it's time I told you their story. So we're here at Mount Washington Cemetery in Independence, Missouri. That's in Jackson County, Missouri. And we're here to look up the Swope family. That is on my husband's side, on his mom's side of the family. Back in the early 1900s, there was the trial of the century, the Swope murders. Thomas Hutton Swope, along with 2 other family members, died under mysterious circumstances, but their doctor put it down as normal circumstances. I can't remember the causes of death at this moment because there was a couple of different causes of death. But anyway, they died. But Maggie Chrisman Swope, she was very suspicious of this doctor and said, no, there's something wrong. We got to investigate this. Now, it turns out, yes, there actually was some suspicion behind this. Other people in the family started getting sick, now with typhoid fever. No one else died, but something was wrong. Couldn't figure out what was going on, so they started questioning the doctor. And eventually, the doctor got put on trial. And we've already visited his gravestone, and that was Bennett Clark Hyde. He was the doctor who was in charge of the family. What he was trying to do was to off the family one by one by one to get to the family fortune. You see, Colonel Thomas Hutton Swope was a millionaire in the 1900s. Millionaire. So by today's value, I don't even know how many millions or billions that would have been. So they were trying to get to his fortune. They were a very wealthy family in Independence. So he was put on trial. We'll get into more of that a little bit later, but for now, we're here, like I said, at Mount Washington Cemetery, and we're visiting the graves of those family members. Some of the ones that died by the hand of Dr. Hyde, and some of them that are just the family members, especially Maggie Chrisman Swope, who went after him to get him to pay for what he did to her family. So come take a look. This is Maggie Chrisman Swope. She is the sister-in-law of Thomas Hutton Swope. And she was the wife of Logan Swope. Logan was brothers with Thomas Hutton Swope. She is the one who went after the doctor because of what he was doing to her family. Next to her is William Chrisman Swope, one of the ones who actually did die at the hand of Dr. Hyde. And with her here, we've got her family. Now, there is one little fact that makes all of this just really messed up. The family doctor, he was related to the family. He was married to Maggie's daughter, Frances. That was her nephew. And he thought he could get at the family fortune by killing off everybody else. Well, didn't happen. And we'll tell you more about that story later. But for now, here's where we are visiting their graves. If this story wouldn't have been so well documented, I wouldn't have believed it myself. One of the other victims of Dr. Hyde is also buried here, James Moss Hunton. He was the first victim of Dr. Hyde, and it is suspected that he killed Mr. Hunton because he was the executor of Colonel Swope's will and a guardian to the colonel as well. In the colonel's will, his fortune would be divided among Maggie's children since he had no children of his own. The combined total of monies and real estate came to be around $300,000 to each child, except for Frances. She was to receive quite a bit less than her siblings. And it was written up in the will that if any of Maggie's children died, their cut would be divided equally to the remaining children. That's when William Chrisman Swope suddenly died, and the rest of the household came down sick, except for Dr. Hyde and his wife. Other family members also testified that Dr. Hyde had given them an injection of medicine which almost took their lives. Thanks to the strength of Maggie Swope and those around her that gave her support, they stopped Dr. Hyde from killing more family members. The first trial was held in 1910, and it was no surprise that the jurors came back with a guilty verdict. Dr. Hyde was convicted of murder. But it wouldn't end there. Dr. Hyde and his wife were able to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, where it was overturned, citing some issues with evidence and the way it was preserved and presented. They attempted to try Dr. Hyde again at the expense of Maggie Swope, but in the end, Dr. Hyde walked away a free man. Poor Maggie was distraught. All that work and expense for nothing. Her wealth had been drained considerably, and she couldn't keep up with the cost of maintaining their mansion anymore, so she was forced to sell the property to the Church of Latter-day Saints, who owned the property right next to her as well. She spent her last days in a sanatorium in Independence, passing away on January 21st, 1942. When she died, she only had about $3,000 to pass down to her remaining children, which amounted to about $600 each, a far cry from the hundreds of thousands they were originally to inherit. Now, this is only a snippet of what all happened. If you want to learn more about this story, I suggest you read the book Deaths on Pleasant Street by Giles Fowler. The author took the time to pore over case files, along with newspaper clippings and other sources to compile this story, and it is an excellent book to read. Rest in peace, Swope family.